Kate Morrison stepped off the transport shuttle and looked up at the massive ceiling of Nexus Prime Station. The orbital platform stretched for miles in every direction and housed beings from across the galaxy. Bright lights painted the walls, in colors she had never seen before, and the air hummed with energy from a dozen different technologies working together. She carried herself like any other diplomat would. Her dark blue uniform was pressed and clean, and her auburn hair was pulled, back in a simple style. To anyone watching, she looked calm and professional. No one would guess that she had spent 15 years leading special operations teams through the worst conflicts humanity had ever known. The main corridor buzzed with activity as representatives from 12 different species moved toward the great assembly hall. Kate watched them carefully while keeping her face neutral. The Krellians towered above everyone else with their thick, armored skin and massive frames. Each one looked like they could tear apart a small building with their bare hands. The Zephyrians moved in graceful groups, and their pale blue skin seemed to glow slightly. Kate knew they could speak directly into each other's minds without making a sound. A small group of insect-like beings scuttled past her on 6 legs each. Their compound eyes reflected the station lights like jewels. Kate recognized them as Hixari traders from the briefing files. They controlled most of the rare mineral trade in this sector of space. She made mental notes of everything she saw. So, security checkpoints were laughably simple by human standards. A few energy scanners and some guards who looked bored. The ventilation systems were clearly marked and easy to access. Emergency exits led to obvious locations. If someone wanted to cause trouble on this station, it would not be very difficult. Ambassador Kate Morrison was here as Earth's first official representative to the Galactic Council. Humanity had been discovered only 3 years ago when one of their deep space probes had accidentally wandered into Krellian territory. Since then, the various alien species had been watching Earth with curiosity and mild interest. Most of them seemed to think humans were a primitive race that might be useful for basic labor or simple trade. Kate knew better. She had read every intelligence report about galactic military doctrine and political structure. These species had been at peace for so long that they had forgotten how to really fight. Their wars were formal affairs with rules and honor codes. They had never faced an enemy that would do anything to win. The great assembly hall opened before her, and Kate felt her breath catch despite her training. The dome stretched up for hundreds of feet and was made entirely of transparent metal. Stars wheeled slowly past overhead as the station rotated. 12 sections radiated out from the center like pieces of a pie. Each section held the delegation from one of the major galactic powers. Kate found the human section and took her assigned seat. It was smaller than the others and placed near the back, a clear message about humanity's place in galactic society. She did not mind. It gave her a better view of everything else. Council Chairman Vextar stood at the center podium. His crystalline body caught the light and threw rainbow patterns across the walls. His voice rang out clear and musical when he spoke. "We gather today to address the greatest threat our civilization has ever faced. The Void Syndicate has destroyed 17 star systems in the past 6 months. Billions of lives have been lost. We must decide how to respond." Angry voices rose from several sections immediately. The Krellian war leader Thakmor pounded his massive fist on his table. "We should strike back with everything we have. Show these criminals what happens when they attack peaceful worlds." High Priestess Nilara of the Zephyrians stood gracefully, and her mental voice touched every mind in the hall. "Violence will only lead to more violence. We should try to understand what drives them to such desperate acts. Perhaps we can find a peaceful solution." Kate listened to the arguments flow back and forth. Each species approached the problem from their own perspective. The Krellians wanted direct military action. The Zephyrians favored negotiation and understanding. The trading species worried about economic impacts. The scientific races wanted more data before making any decisions. What struck Kate most was how naive they all seemed. They spoke about the Void Syndicate like it was a political movement or a criminal organization that could be reasoned with. None of them seemed to understand that they were dealing with something that wanted to destroy everything they had built. She had studied the attack patterns and ship movements. The syndicate struck without warning and left no survivors. They used advanced technology that none of the galactic powers recognized. Most importantly, they showed no interest in territory or resources. They simply destroyed and moved on. Kate knew what that meant, even if the Council did not. This was not about politics or economics or territorial disputes. This was about extinction. Someone or something wanted to wipe out galactic civilization completely. The debate continued for hours without reaching any real conclusions. Kate took careful notes and memorized faces and names. She paid special attention to who seemed competent and who seemed weak. In her experience, you could learn more about people by watching how they handled crisis than by reading their diplomatic files. As the first day ended, Kate walked back to her quarters. The corridors were quieter now, but still busy with late-night activities. She passed maintenance crews working on environmental systems and night-shift security patrols making their rounds. Her room was small but comfortable with a view of the nearby nebula. Kate stood at the window and looked out at the swirling clouds of gas and dust. Somewhere out there, the Void Syndicate was preparing their next attack. And tomorrow she would sit in that assembly hall and watch the Council argue about what to do while precious time slipped away. Kate opened her personal communication device and began typing her first report back to Earth Command. She wrote in careful diplomatic language about the proceedings and her observations. But between the lines was a different message for those who knew how to read it. The Galactic Council was not prepared for what was coming. Their security was weak, and their military thinking was outdated. If humanity wanted to survive in this galaxy, they would need to be ready to stand alone. She finished the report and sealed it with her diplomatic codes. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new information. But tonight, Kate Morrison allowed herself to be what she really was, not a diplomat, but a soldier preparing for war. The second day of the Council session started like any other diplomatic meeting. Representatives filed into the Great Assembly Hall with their morning beverages and data tablets. Chairman Vextar called for order and the various species settled into their assigned sections. Kate Morrison sat in the human delegation area and reviewed her notes from the previous day. She had spent the night analyzing the station's layout and security procedures. What she found was troubling. The defensive systems were designed to stop pirates or small raiding parties. They would be useless against a coordinated military assault. The shield generators were centralized and vulnerable. The weapon systems were automated and could be easily hacked or disabled. Kate kept these observations to herself. Her job was to observe and report, not to interfere with galactic politics. Earth had made it clear that humanity needed to build trust slowly before offering military advice. The morning debate focused on economic sanctions against systems that might be supporting the Void Syndicate. Trade Minister Colvex from the Hegemony Coalition presented detailed charts showing shipping routes and financial flows. The Zephyrian delegation listened politely while projecting thoughts of peaceful resolution. Kate found herself getting frustrated with the slow pace and circular arguments. These beings acted like they had unlimited time to solve the problem. They did not seem to understand that every day of delay meant more innocent people would die at exactly 11:30 station time. The lights went out. Emergency, power kicked. In 3 seconds later, bathing everything in red light. Kate was already moving before most of the aliens realized what was happening. Her training took over automatically as she scanned for threats and escape routes. The first explosion came from the direction of the main shield generators. Kate felt the station shudder beneath her feet as massive amounts of energy were released. Alarm klaxons began wailing throughout the complex. Chairman Vextar tried to maintain order from his central podium, but his crystalline voice was lost in the growing chaos. Delegates from various species began shouting questions and demands in a dozen different languages. Kate spotted the attackers before anyone else did. Dark figures in advanced armor were moving through the maintenance corridors she had mapped the night before. They carried weapons she did not recognize and moved with military precision. "Contact front," she whispered to herself, using old habits from her combat days. The attackers struck simultaneously from multiple directions. Energy beams cut through the air where seconds before delegates had been standing. The smell of burned metal and ozone filled the hall as alien technology clashed against whatever the syndicate was using. Panic erupted immediately. The massive Krellian warriors, who looked so impressive during debates, stumbled over each other trying to reach cover. Their thick armor was useless against energy weapons that cut through it like paper. The Zephyrian priestesses tried to use their mental abilities to coordinate a defense, but the attackers seemed immune to telepathic contact. Their minds were either shielded or not present at all. Kate dropped to the floor and rolled behind an overturned table. She pulled out her diplomatic communicator and switched it to emergency frequencies, Nexus Prime Control. "This is Ambassador Morrison. We have armed hostiles in the assembly hall. Repeat, armed hostiles in the assembly hall," Static answered her. Either the communication systems were down or Control was no longer responding. She looked around the hall and assessed the situation with professional calm. At least 30 attackers had entered from 6 different access points. They wore full body armor that covered any identifying features. Their weapons were advanced particle beams that could cut through most known materials. The station security forces were trying to respond, but they were outmatched and confused. Kate watched a team of Hixari guards get cut down in seconds as they charged straight into enemy fire. Their insect-like anatomy meant they relied on speed and numbers, but the attackers had anticipated this. More explosions rocked the station as the assault teams hit other key targets. Kate recognized the pattern immediately. This was not a random attack or a terrorist incident. This was a military operation designed to eliminate the entire Galactic Council leadership in one coordinated strike. She spotted Chairman Vextar near the central podium. His crystalline body was cracked in several places and pale fluid leaked from the wounds. He was trying to crawl toward an emergency exit, but more attackers were moving to cut him off. Kate made a quick decision that would change everything. She could not sit back and watch the galactic leadership get slaughtered, even if it meant revealing more about human capabilities than Earth wanted. She moved fast and low using techniques learned in urban combat zones across human space. The nearest attacker never saw her coming. Kate grabbed an energy cutter from a maintenance kit and drove it into the gap between his helmet and body armor. The attacker dropped without a sound, and Kate immediately stripped his weapon and equipment. The particle beam rifle was heavier than human designs, but well-balanced. She found extra power cells and a tactical scanner on his belt. 2 more attackers were advancing on the wounded chairman. Kate lined up her shots carefully and fired twice. Both enemies dropped before they knew they were under attack. She reached Vextar and quickly examined his wounds. The crystalline being was bleeding some kind of luminescent fluid, but he was still conscious. "Ambassador Morrison," he whispered in his musical voice. "You must get the others to safety." Kate looked around the hall and saw delegates from multiple species trapped behind inadequate cover. The attackers were methodically working their way through the room, eliminating anyone they found. "Stay down and do not move," she told the chairman. "I will be back for you." Kate began moving through the chaos with deadly purpose. She used the overturned furniture and debris as concealment while picking off attackers one by one. Each shot was carefully aimed, and none were wasted. The aliens around her watched in stunned silence as this small human female began turning the tide of battle. They had seen her as a weak diplomatic observer, but now she moved like death itself. An attacker spotted her and opened fire with a heavy weapon. Kate rolled sideways and came up shooting. Her return fire took him center mass, and he crashed too. The floor she commandeered a Krellian warrior's position behind an overturned bench. "War leader." Thakmor stared at her with his large eyes. "How do you know how to do this?" He rumbled in his deep voice. "Humans are good at killing things," Kate replied simply as she reloaded her captured weapon. "Stay here and keep your head down. The battle was far from over." but the attackers had lost the initiative. Kate Morrison had entered the fight, and the Void Syndicate was about to learn why humanity had survived every war it had ever fought. Kate moved through the assembly hall like a predator hunting prey. Each step was calculated, and every shot found its target. The Void Syndicate attackers had expected to face confused diplomats and ceremonial guards. They had not planned for a human special operations veteran who treated this like any other Tuesday. She reached a group of trapped Zephyrian delegates who were huddled behind their ornate speaking platform. High Priestess Nalara looked up at Kate with her large silver eyes filled with fear and confusion. Ambassador Morrison, "How are you doing this?" the priestess asked through her telepathic voice. Kate did not answer immediately. She was watching an attacker trying to flank their position from the left side. She waited until he was in the perfect spot, then put 2 energy bolts through his center mass. "Humans have been fighting wars for 10,000 years, Kate said calmly as she reloaded. "We got very good at it." She helped the Zephyrians move to a more secure position near the emergency exits. The telepathic beings were physically fragile, but their mental abilities could be useful if directed properly. "Can you contact other parts of the station?" Kate asked Nalara. "I am trying, but something is blocking our thoughts. It feels like empty space where minds should be." Kate nodded grimly. Either the attackers were using some kind of telepathic shielding, or they were not entirely biological. Both possibilities were troubling. An explosion from the upper galleries sent debris raining down on the hall floor. Kate looked up and saw more attackers rappelling from the damaged sections. They were trying to establish crossfire positions that would trap the surviving delegates. She grabbed a fallen piece of crystalline sculpture and hurled it with precise aim. The improvised projectile struck the lead attacker and sent him tumbling to the floor below. Kate was already moving to intercept the others before they could set up their weapons. War Leader. Thakmor watched in amazement as the small human female outfought enemies that had overwhelmed his elite warriors, your species. "Must be incredible soldiers," he said in his rumbling voice. "We are okay at it." Kate replied while setting up a defensive position, "But mostly we just never learned when to quit." She had acquired several weapons from fallen attackers and was using them in ways their designers never intended. The particle beam rifles could be overloaded to create makeshift grenades. The tactical scanners revealed enemy positions through the smoke and debris. Kate worked her way across the hall, methodically clearing threats and gathering survivors. She found Trade Minister Kolvex trapped under a collapsed beam and used a cutting tool to free him. The injury to his leg looked serious, but he would live. "The medical station is 3 levels down," she told him. "Can you make it that far?" "I think so," Kolvex replied. "But what about the others?" Kate looked around at the remaining delegates scattered throughout the hall. At least 40 beings from different species were still alive, but they were pinned down by enemy fire. The attackers had regrouped and were advancing with heavy weapons. "I will handle this," Kate said simply. She moved to the central podium where Chairman Vextar was still conscious despite his injuries. The crystalline being's internal light was growing dimmer, but he managed to focus on her face. "The station communication systems," he whispered. "They are controlled from the main hub 2 sections over." Kate understood immediately. If she could reach the communication center, she could coordinate with any remaining security forces and call for help from nearby ships. "I need you to gather everyone in the Northeast Emergency Shelter," she told the chairman. "Wait for my signal, then move fast." Kate began making her way toward the exit that led to the communication hub. The route would take her through sections of the station that were crawling with enemy forces. It was essentially a suicide mission by any reasonable standard. She did not think of it that way. This was just another target that needed to be reached, and another objective that needed to be completed. The fact that she might die in the process was irrelevant. The first corridor outside the assembly hall was filled with smoke from damaged environmental systems. Kate moved carefully, using the reduced visibility to mask her approach. She could hear enemy voices communicating in a language she did not recognize. 2 attackers were guarding the main intersection ahead. Kate studied their positions and equipment through the haze. They carried heavy weapons and wore full armor. But they were standing in the open like they owned the place. She pulled out 2 small charges she had improvised from maintenance equipment. The makeshift explosives were crude but effective. Kate threw them with the precision of someone who had done this many times before. The explosions took out both guards and cleared the intersection. Kate moved through the smoke and continued toward her objective. Behind her, she could hear the surviving delegates beginning to move toward the emergency shelter. The communication hub was protected by a reinforced door and multiple security systems. Under normal circumstances, it would take specialized equipment and several hours to break through. Kate did not have either time or proper tools. She did have something better: human ingenuity and a complete disregard for safety protocols. Kate overloaded 3 particle beam rifles simultaneously and wedged them against the door frame. The resulting explosion blew the entire entrance apart and set off every alarm in that section of the station. She dove through the burning opening and immediately came under fire from defenders inside the hub. Kate rolled behind a bank of computer terminals and assessed the situation. 4 attackers were positioned around the central control console. They had destroyed most of the communication equipment, but some systems were still functional. Kate could see displays showing other parts of the station where fighting was still going on. She began picking off the defenders one by one using angles and timing they could not anticipate. Her movements were smooth and economical with no wasted motion or missed shots. The last attacker tried to destroy the remaining communication systems before Kate could reach them. She put a burst of energy through his chest, and he collapsed across the control panel. Kate quickly examined the equipment and found what she needed. The emergency broadcast system was still online and connected to the station-wide network. She activated every speaker and communication device on Nexus Prime. "This is Ambassador Kate Morrison to all station personnel." Her voice echoed through miles of corridors. "The assembly hall has been secured. All surviving delegates are moving to emergency shelter Northeast Section 7. Security teams converge on that location for extraction." She paused and looked at the tactical displays showing enemy positions throughout the station. "Be advised, we are dealing with professional military forces using advanced weapons and tactics. Do not attempt to engage unless you have overwhelming superiority. Repeat, do not engage unless you have overwhelming superiority." Kate knew the message would reach any surviving security forces, and hopefully some of the nearby ships that served the galactic powers. More importantly, it would let the enemy know that their surprise was gone and someone was coordinating the defense. She gathered up all the portable communication equipment she could carry and began making her way back to the emergency shelter. The hardest part was still ahead. Kate made her way back through the damaged corridors of Nexus Prime with growing concern. The communication hub had given her access to the station's internal sensors, and what she saw was troubling. The Void Syndicate forces were not just random attackers. They were moving with precision and coordination that suggested detailed knowledge of the station layout. She reached the emergency shelter to find 37 surviving delegates from various species huddled together in the reinforced chamber. Chairman Vextar was still conscious despite his crystalline body showing extensive cracks. Trade Minister Colvex had improvised a bandage for his injured leg using cloth from his ceremonial robes. War Leader Thakmor approached Kate as soon as she entered the shelter. The massive Krellian warrior looked shaken despite his fearsome appearance. "Ambassador Morrison, we owe you our lives," he said in his deep, rumbling voice. "But I must ask, how did a human diplomat learn to fight like that?" Kate set down the communication equipment she had salvaged and began checking it for damage. She did not look up when she answered. "Humans do not make good diplomats unless they understand what they are trying to prevent." High Priestess Nilara moved closer with her graceful, floating steps. Her telepathic voice touched Kate's mind gently. "Your thoughts are unlike anything I have encountered before. There are layers of training and experience that speak of terrible conflicts." Kate finally looked up at the assembled delegates. They were staring at her with mixtures of awe, fear, and curiosity. She realized that her cover as a simple diplomatic observer was completely blown. Earth has been at war with itself for most of its history, she said calmly. We learned to fight because we had to. We got good at it because the alternative was extinction. She activated the portable scanner and began studying the enemy positions throughout the station. The attackers were regrouping and moving toward their current location. They had maybe 30 minutes before the shelter would be overrun. The question now is whether you want to survive this or just wait here to die. Trade Minister Kolvex shifted, his weight carefully to avoid putting pressure on his injured leg. What do you suggest, Ambassador? Kate spread out a schematic of the station on the floor and pointed to several key locations. We move to the secondary power station and use it as a base. From there, we can control environmental systems and defensive weapons. But it means traveling through hostile territory with injured personnel. War leader Thakmor examined the route Kate had traced with one massive finger. My warriors would never attempt such a dangerous path. It goes through 3 sections that are certainly occupied by enemy forces. Your warriors fight like this is a ceremony with rules and honor codes, Kate replied bluntly. These enemies do not care about honor. They want you dead, and they will use any method to achieve that goal. She stood up and began distributing weapons she had taken from fallen attackers. If you want to live, you need to think like humans. Fast, dirty, and without mercy. The next few minutes were spent teaching basic combat principles to beings who had never faced real warfare. Kate showed the Zephyrians how to use their telepathic abilities for tactical coordination. She explained to the Krellians how their natural armor could be used for breaching techniques instead of just passive protection. Most importantly, she taught them about human concepts like suppressing fire and bounding overwatch, military tactics that prioritized survival and mission completion over individual glory. The first test came sooner than expected. Enemy forces had located the emergency shelter and were preparing to assault it. Kate watched through her scanner as they set up heavy weapons outside the main entrance. They are going to try to break in with explosives, she told the group. We move now, or we die here. She led them through a maintenance hatch that opened into the station's internal infrastructure. The space was cramped and dark, but it allowed them to bypass the enemy forces. Kate moved point with her captured rifle ready. Behind her came the wounded delegates, struggling to keep up despite their injuries. War leader Thakmor brought up the rear using his massive frame to protect the group from behind. They had traveled less than 100 meters when Kate heard familiar voices speaking in English. Team 3 is in position at the power station. No sign of the targets yet. Copy that. Team leader wants them taken alive if possible. Command wants to interrogate the human before disposal. Kate froze and held up her hand to stop the group. The voices belonged to humans, which meant the Void Syndicate was not just using alien technology and tactics. She activated her communicator and switched to a military frequency that only humans would know. Team 3. This is Command Authority 7. 7 Charlie, she said, using old special operations codes. What is your mission status? A pause, then a familiar voice answered, Well, Ambassador Morrison. I wondered when you would figure it out. Kate felt ice forming in her stomach as she recognized the voice of Commander Rick Barnes. He had been her training instructor years ago before disappearing during a deep space mission. Rick. What are you doing here, cleaning up the galaxy? Kate, these alien species are weak and divided. Humanity could rule this entire sector if we had the will to take it. The alien delegates listened in growing horror as they realized that humans were leading the attack against them. High Priestess Nelara's telepathic voice was filled with confusion and betrayal. Your own species is trying to kill us. Kate keyed her communicator again. Rick, these beings are not our enemies. They offered humanity a place in galactic civilization. As junior partners and manual laborers, Barnes replied with contempt. I have a better idea. We take what we want and let them serve us. The conversation revealed everything Kate had feared. A faction of humans had decided that cooperation was weakness, and that their military superiority gave them the right to dominate. You always were. Too soft, Kate. Barnes continued. Meet me at the power station and we can settle this properly. Come alone and I might let some of the aliens live. Kate looked at the frightened faces around her and made her decision. This was no longer about protecting the Galactic Council. This was about the future of humanity itself. I will be there, Rick, but you are wrong about one thing. What is that? I was never soft. I just learned the difference between strength and cruelty. She turned off the communicator and faced the alien delegates. I am going to stop this, but I need you to trust me despite what you just heard. Chairman Vextar spoke in his cracked, crystalline voice. You are not like the others. No, Kate agreed. I am not, and I am going to prove it. Kate led the surviving delegates through the maintenance tunnels toward the secondary power station. Her mind was racing as she planned their approach. Rick Barnes had always been a skilled tactician, but he was also arrogant. That combination could be used against him. She stopped the group at a junction point and gathered them around her portable scanner. I need to explain something about human military doctrine, she said quietly. We do not fight fair battles. We create unfair advantages and exploit enemy weaknesses. War leader Thakmor looked confused despite his years of military experience. But how can you win without honor? Honor is a luxury for people who are not trying to survive, Kate replied. These attackers abandoned honor when they decided to murder civilians. Now we use their weakness against them. She pointed to the scanner display showing enemy positions. They expect us to run or hide or try to negotiate. They do not expect us to attack them directly. This gives us surprise, which is the most important weapon in any fight. High Priestess Nilara projected her thoughts carefully. What do you need us to do? Kate outlined a plan that would have been considered insane by galactic military standards. Instead of trying to escape or call for help, they would assault the power station directly. The alien delegates would use their natural abilities in ways they had never imagined. Priestess, your telepathic range extends through most of the station. Correct. Yes, but the attackers seem immune to mental contact. Not all of them, Kate said grimly. Some of those voices were human. You can reach them and cause confusion at the right moment. She turned to War Leader Thakmor. Your armor can withstand energy weapons for a short time. I need you to draw their fire while I flank them. This is madness, the Krellian rumbled. We are diplomats, not soldiers. Today you are whatever you need to be to survive, Kate replied. Trade Minister Kolvek struggled to his feet despite his injured leg. What about those of us who cannot fight? Kate handed him a portable communication device. You coordinate with any security forces that are still functional. Guide them to our position when the shooting starts. She checked her captured weapons and made sure everyone understood their roles. The plan relied on timing and surprise. If any part failed, they would all die. Remember, these people betrayed everything humanity should stand for. They chose to be predators instead of protectors. We are going to show them what humans can really do when we fight for something that matters. The approach to the power station took them through sections of the station that had been damaged by the initial assault. Emergency lights cast strange shadows, and the air was thick with smoke from burning systems. Kate moved with the fluid grace of someone who had spent years in hostile territory. She used hand signals to coordinate the group and kept them moving. Despite their fear, they reached the outer perimeter of the power station without being detected. Kate could see at least 12 attackers positioned around the facility. Half of them appeared to be human based on their size and movement patterns. She activated her communicator on the old military frequency. Rick, I am here as promised. Let us finish this. Come into the main chamber, Kate. No weapons and no tricks. You know I cannot do that. Too many people are depending on me. Barnes laughed, and the sound was filled with contempt, still playing the noble soldier. You never understood. That might makes right in this universe. Kate signaled to her alien allies, and the assault began. High Priestess Nilara focused her telepathic abilities on the human attackers. She could not control their minds, but she could create confusion and disorientation. Several of them stumbled or hesitated at crucial moments. War leader Thakmor charged the main entrance with his massive frame absorbing energy weapon fire. His natural armor held long enough for him to scatter the defenders and create an opening. Kate moved through the chaos with deadly precision. She had memorized the layout during their approach and used maintenance shafts to reach unexpected positions. Fighting was brutal in close quarters. Kate found herself face to face with human soldiers who had chosen to serve Rick Barnes instead of their own species. She felt no hesitation as she eliminated them one by one. The alien delegates fought with desperate courage they had never known they possessed. Trade Minister Kolvex coordinated the arrival of surviving station security forces. The Zephyrians used their mental abilities to predict enemy movements. Within minutes, the outer defenses had been breached and Kate was moving toward the central power control room where Rick Barnes waited. She found him standing calmly among banks of control systems. He wore the same type of advanced armor as his troops, but his helmet was removed. His face looked exactly as she remembered from their training days together. "Hello, Kate. You look good for someone who just fought through a small army. Rick, why are you doing this? Because someone has to. These alien species have technologies and resources that could benefit humanity. Instead, they offer us charity and junior partnership." Kate kept her weapon trained on him while scanning for other threats. They offered us friendship and cooperation. They offered us slavery with better living conditions. Barnes replied, "I prefer to take what we need, by committing genocide, by establishing proper hierarchy. Humans are the superior military force in this galaxy. We should act like it." Kate could see the madness in his eyes now. Years of isolation and resentment had twisted him into something she barely recognized. The Council was willing to give us a full seat and equal voting rights. After they studied us like laboratory animals for 3 years, Barnes snarled, "I will not beg for scraps from beings we could conquer in a month." The philosophical argument was interrupted by the arrival of more security forces. Kate could hear fighting throughout the power station as Barnes' loyal troops made their final stand. "It is over, Rick. Surrender, and maybe we can work something out." "No, Kate. If I cannot have this galaxy, then no one can." Barnes reached for a control panel that would overload the power station and destroy half of Nexus Prime. Kate shot him twice. In the chest before he could complete the sequence. He fell backward against the control systems and looked up at her with surprise. "You always were the better soldier," he whispered. Kate knelt beside him and checked his wounds. They were fatal. But he had a few minutes left. "This is not what humanity should become, Rick." "Maybe not," he replied with his voice growing weaker. "But it is what we will become eventually. We are too good at war to resist using it. That is why we need teachers and allies instead of servants and enemies." Rick Barnes died with a bitter smile on his face. Kate stood over his body and felt the weight of what humanity could become if they chose the wrong path. The surviving alien delegates found her there a few minutes later. They looked at the dead human with mixtures of relief and sadness. Chairman Vextar spoke in his damaged, crystalline voice. "Is it finished?" Kate looked around at the faces watching her and made a decision that would echo through galactic history. The fighting is finished, but our real work is just beginning. Kate Morrison stood in the restored assembly hall of Nexus Prime 3 days after the attack. The scars from the battle were still visible, but repair crews had worked around the clock to make the chamber functional again. Representatives from 12 species filled the seats, though many faces were missing from those who had not survived. The rescue ships had arrived within hours of the fighting ending. Medical teams had treated the wounded while security forces swept the station for remaining threats. What they found was troubling. Rick Barnes had not been working alone. Evidence suggested a network of human separatists who believed in conquest rather than cooperation. Kate wore her diplomatic uniform again, but everyone knew it was just a costume now. The aliens looked at her with a mixture of respect and wariness. They had seen what humans could do when pushed to violence, and the knowledge changed everything. Chairman Vextar called for order from his restored position at the central podium. His crystalline body bore permanent cracks from the attack, but his voice remained clear and musical. We gather today to address the revelation that humanity possesses military capabilities far beyond what we initially understood. Ambassador Morrison, will you please explain your background to the Council? Kate stood and faced the assembled delegates. She had dreaded this moment, but knew it was necessary. My name is Kate Morrison, and I served 15 years as a Special Operations Commander in the human military before becoming a diplomat. My mission here was to observe and assess galactic society while representing Earth's interests. Angry voices rose from several sections immediately. The Hixari delegation chittered their displeasure, while some of the smaller species demanded to know what other secrets humanity was hiding. War leader Thakmor stood, and his massive frame commanded attention. Ambassador Morrison saved all our lives during the attack. Without her training and leadership, we would all be dead. I believe her actions speak louder than her previous concealment. High Priestess Nilara projected her thoughts to the entire assembly. I have touched the ambassador's mind during combat. She carries the burden of many conflicts, but also deep respect for life. Her violence was directed only at those who threatened innocence. Trade Minister Kolvex limped to his speaking position with his leg still bandaged. The question is not whether humans can fight. The question is whether they can be trusted to use that ability responsibly. Kate nodded and walked to the center of the hall where everyone could see her clearly. Earth's government authorized me to reveal our full military capabilities if the situation demanded it. What you witnessed during the attack represents standard training for human special forces. We have technologies and tactics that could overwhelm most galactic defenses. The hall fell silent as the implications sank in. Several species began urgent communications among themselves, however. Kate continued, we did not come here to conquer or dominate. We came to learn and to find our place among galactic civilization. She gestured toward the memorial wall where the names of those killed in the attack were displayed. Rick Barnes and his followers represent one possible future for humanity. They believed that military strength gave them the right to rule others. I killed him because that is not the future I want for my species. Chairman Vextar spoke into the silence. What future do you want? Ambassador. Kate looked around at the faces watching her. Some showed fear, others curiosity, and a few displayed something. That might have been hope. I want humanity to be protectors instead of predators. Our history of warfare taught us the cost of conflict. We learned to fight so well because we wanted the fighting to stop. She activated a holographic display showing images from Earth's history, battlefields and destroyed cities, but also peace treaties and reconstruction efforts. Every human war ended with someone trying to build something better from the ruins. We are not just good at destruction. We are good at survival and adaptation and eventually peace. War leader Thakmor rumbled his approval. Your actions during the crisis prove this. You could have escaped alone but chose to protect others instead. Kate nodded toward the Krellian warrior, because that is what strength should be used for. Protection, not domination. The debate continued for hours as each species wrestled with the new reality. Some delegates argued for restrictions on human expansion, while others wanted to form military alliances immediately. Finally, Chairman Vextar called for a formal vote on humanity's status within galactic society. All those in favor of granting Earth full council membership with complete voting rights. The result was unanimous. Every species that had survived the attack voted to accept humanity as equals. Kate felt tears forming in her eyes as the implications hit her. Earth would have a voice in galactic affairs, and humanity would be judged by their actions rather than their origins. There is one condition, Chairman Vextar added. Earth must establish a military training exchange program with interested council. Species. We want to learn human defensive tactics. Kate smiled for the first time in days. I think that can be arranged. But we will also want to learn from you about diplomacy and peaceful conflict resolution. Trade Minister Kolvex stood carefully on his injured leg. Ambassador, will you be staying as Earth's permanent representative? For now, yes. But other humans will be joining me soon. Diplomats and teachers and scientists who can help build bridges between our species, High Priestess Nilara projected a final thought. What about others like Rick Barnes? How do we prepare for humans who choose conquest over cooperation? Kate looked at the memorial wall again and thought about all the people who had died because one human chose the wrong path by proving that cooperation works better than conquest. By showing that strength shared makes everyone stronger. She turned back to face the assembly. Humanity is entering galactic society with full knowledge of what we are capable of. We choose to use that capability to protect what we help build rather than destroy what others have created. The session ended with formal ceremonies and diplomatic protocols, but Kate knew the real work was just beginning. Earth would need to prove itself through actions rather than words. That evening, she stood again at her quarters window looking out at the nebula. A message from Earth Command was waiting on her communication device. She opened it and read the new orders. More human diplomats were being assigned to various worlds throughout galactic space. Military advisors would help establish defensive alliances. Scientists would share technology and knowledge, but most importantly, Earth was committing. To the long, slow work of building trust across species barriers, Kate began typing her final report as a solo ambassador. Soon, she would be part of a much larger effort to integrate humanity into galactic civilization. She wrote about the attack and the revelation of human military capabilities. She wrote about Rick Barnes and the path humanity had chosen not to take. She wrote about alien species who had chosen to trust rather than fear. Most importantly, she wrote about the future that was now possible if everyone worked together. Kate sealed the report and sent it toward Earth. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities. But tonight she allowed herself to feel hopeful. Humanity had passed its first real test in galactic society. They had proven they could fight when necessary, but also that they would choose protection over predation. The galaxy was about to discover what humans could accomplish when they used their talents for building instead of destroying. And Kate Morrison would be there to help guide that process as long as she was needed.